how people with epilepsy were treated. Healthcare has evolved considerably, and the attitudes of society evolved considerably.
So the epilepsies themselves haven't changed over time, but how they are understood and how people with them are treated certainly has. Simon Shorvon, a consultant neurologist from UCL and author of the book The Idea of Epilepsy, today talks to us about how our attitudes and approaches to the epilepsies have evolved over the past 160 years, the significant changes in research, diagnosis and treatment methods, and how we need to remember to learn from the past.
Well, hi, Torie. Thanks for inviting me to this podcast. My name's Simon Shorvon. I'm a neurologist, was appointed as a consultant neurologist in 1983, and I'm a professor of neurology at UCL. And my career has been mainly in the field of epilepsy. I did my research in epilepsy as part of my training from about 1978, and since then I've stayed in the field of epilepsy. And over the years have treated many people with epilepsy at the National Hospital, Queen Square. I've researched into various aspects of epilepsy, including the epidemiology, the drug treatment, and the diagnosis and imaging of epilepsy particularly.
If you've been focusing on epilepsy for so many years, things must have changed quite a lot over time, I guess, right?
Things have changed a great deal, yeah. I mean, the diagnosis, in the time since I've been involved in epilepsy, MRI scanning came in, CT scanning came in, video telemetry came in. So the diagnosis of epilepsy has been very greatly improved, the methods of diagnosis, and also treatment. So since I was first involved in epilepsy, I should think there are 10 or maybe 12 new medications for epilepsy, and surgical treatment has also advanced. Over my time, I've seen great changes.
I can only imagine. And I guess that kind of leads us on to your book, really, that sort of the relatively recent history of epilepsy. Hang on, let me get it. I have it right next to me. So we have, The Idea of Epilepsy, much of which I have personally read, and it's pretty extraordinary what we have gone through. Could you tell us a little bit about what led you to write this book and a bit about the book, please?
Well, thanks, Torie. So the idea, the modern history of epilepsy really started in about 150 years ago in the late 19th century. And over the period that followed, there have been enormous changes, not only in the medical aspects, but also in the social aspects of epilepsy, how society views epilepsy, how people with epilepsy were treated. Healthcare has evolved considerably, and the attitudes of society evolved considerably. And the book tries to chart the history of this over the period. I chose the period 1860 to 2020, and this covers the development of modern medicine, really, and also the period of eugenics, which had a dire effect on people with epilepsy. Also, the rise and fall of psychoanalysis, which also had a pretty negative effect, I would say, on people with epilepsy. The rise of scientific medicine, the rise of the pharmaceutical industry, and with the modern drugs, not only anti-epilepsy drugs, but also antibiotics and anesthetics, for instance, how much more advanced surgery became possible. So it's the story of that, of the evolution of these developments in relation to epilepsy. I must say it's not an entirely happy story. There were some pretty negative events too. And the book tries to cover these and to take a balanced view on what's good and what's bad. But at the end, I also try to make a guess about what in our current treatments, which of them are going to survive and be viewed positively in the future, and which may not survive, or which may even be considered harmful in the future. So in a nutshell, that's what the book's about. I've also tried to cover the voice of the patient, because I think one of the most extraordinary developments in epilepsy since the Second War has been the empowerment of people with epilepsy and other medical conditions too, to actually take part in decision making and to have a voice. And, you know, the rise of the lay organizations has been very important. I've covered the voice of people with epilepsy really through how epilepsy is depicted in literature, in film, and in biography and autobiography. And there have been very great changes in this over the period.
In a former conversation we had, we mentioned how we hope society could perhaps reflect upon the history of epilepsy through, for instance, your book, and learn from it so as not to repeat, shall we politely say, certain mistakes or errors, and indeed continue and to repeat positive things.
Well, I think that's the point of history, or point of anybody studying history, is partly to see what happened in the past and try not to repeat the same sort of mistakes or same sort of patterns in the future. I'm always struck by the analogy Michael Crichton, the author, made that, you know, if you don't know history, you're like a leaf that doesn't know it's part of a tree. In fact, you don't know anything. And that's what he wrote. And I think it's sort of true. And the analogy has the added kind of implications that, you know, there's a cycling of nature and leaves fall off trees and then they become nothing. And much of what we know today will be discarded.
If anybody would like to access or purchase your book, what should they do, Simon?
The book's available on the Cambridge University Press website, or I guess on Amazon or in bookshops, or good bookshops, as they say.
In general. Okay, lovely. Well, anybody, again, if you would like to access this really, honestly, really very educational, something I think everybody should read, book, The Idea of Epilepsy, interesting title, by the way, do check that out. Thank you so much for joining us today, Simon. It's been really sort of insightful, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Torie, for inviting me. I'm very grateful. By the way, I think your website does a fantastic job for people with epilepsy.
Thank you very much to Simon for his insight and for sharing with us his book, which has been years in the making. Do get the book, The Idea of Epilepsy, if you can. It is written in such a way that is readable even if you aren't a clinician. It backs up statements with references to sources and has a really cool epilepsy glossary.